Hey there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you back from the home office of the Philanthropy Mastermind series. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And thanks for letting us take a little breather last week when we were vacationing. It's great to be back with you and with a powerhouse panel that it recently presented at a case conference. And we're kind enough to come and revisit that content with you today. So we're going to be diving into that in just a second. But first, I want to encourage you to do a couple things. First of all, I would love it if you would take a look at our entire calendar of content, which you can find over on the DonorSearch site. DonorSearch, as you probably already know, is our sponsor and has been our sponsor of this series going back to 2016. So you'll find literally hundreds of sessions in our webinar series for CFRE content, for CFRE credit rather, also our webcasts, and then finally, our podcast series. And in fact, one of our guests today is in that series, Ava Wills-Barksdale. So I hope you'll listen to that episode. It's one of my favorites. But all of that content can be found at the DonorSearch site at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, where once again, you'll already find our calendar of all the content we have coming to you this year. There are also recordings of these sessions. So you'll find all those there, as well as on the DonorSearch YouTube channel. So please check all of that out. There are also a couple of ways that you can participate in today's discussion. Some will be provided to you by the presenters themselves. They have some QR codes. So I'd like you to get your phones ready, if you would, and have those ready to participate actively in the session today. That's not a rude thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So get those ready. And in addition, of course, you can always use the chat and the Q&A as you always do in these sessions, and we'll be monitoring those throughout. So with that, I want to invite our panelists to come on board and come back on camera, unmute their microphones, and say hello. We've got, of course, Ava Wills-Barksdale, Scott Lange, Michael Shippam, and Aaron Woolley, who will tell you all about what they're going to be sharing with you about data analytics today. Thank you all so very much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Jay, it's our pleasure. And thank you for the invitation. We've got a couple slides we want to share here to stimulate the conversation. Let me do that right now and move to slideshow mode. Let me know if you're seeing the first screen on your screens.
Perfect.
Okay. Outstanding. As Jay mentioned, this is a conversation that was repurposed. We were proud to be on the platform at the Case 2 conference recently in Baltimore, Maryland. And ironically, the underlying data elements that were used for our conversation came from the generous host of today's session, DonorSearch. Unfortunately, Darrell Bell, who was with us on the stage in Baltimore, was unable to be with us today, but our dear friend and client, Aaron Woolley, has stepped in. So that's her title and not her picture. And you'll have an opportunity to chat with her as the session moves forward. But I'd like to begin with you taking a picture of this QR code so that you can participate in our internal Q&A. Obviously, as Jay mentioned, there's a Q&A session provided through Zoom, and you're welcome to use that throughout the presentation or conversation, because we want this very much to be a two-way thing. So the first question we have is, why did you select this session on analytics? And this is an active poll, so if you want to start just typing in what crossed your mind, that will help my colleagues and I respond to things that are timely for you. And we got some folks coming in right now. I like curiosity. There you go, supporting the team. Better understanding trends. So I love it. I have a lot of data, don't always know what to do with it. That's
perfect.
That's part of the element. This is very good. Thank you so much.
Analytics without action are kind of a waste of time. That's very true.
Yeah, all good. We've We've seen many of these ourselves. I'm going to move to the next slide. Those were supposed to have been archived. What do you hope to get out of today's session? Second question. Hopefully brilliance and insight, because that's what I look to Aaron and Ava for all the time. Good. Knowing what to do, leveraging the resources, new knowledge, learn skills, action plan. Oof. Yep. Okay, so you need to know that our mantra within the firm is to provide pragmatic, actionable insights and next steps. So that's where I think this conversation is going. Thanks so much. I'm going to blow through these. Do you want to talk about this, Michael, and start moving us through the deck?
Sure. Our objectives for doing the session today is just explain from our perspective of doing this day in and day out for clients across the board, is how best to utilize advancement analytics for enhanced prospect identification, most importantly for gift officer portfolio balancing, and we'll spend some time talking through that, goal setting, be it for annual or campaign, really get a handle on the workflow that your gift officers are addressing every single day, and hopefully, based upon what the philanthropic potential of the marketplace is, assist the client in developing a budgeting rationale for new gift officers and assisting in the communication of that to your leadership, both to the advancement committee, to the board, by focusing in on advancement ROI.
Perfect.
So what, when doing analytics, there are some basic questions that drive the initial conversation, particularly when third-party wealth identification, wealth screening is overlaid into the process. Clients want to know, how big is the philanthropic marketplace? And we assist with that by doing an empirical wealth assessment of the prospect pool. We also take a look back as far as what your historical trends are. We like to look back 10 years. Quite often, past practice has a tendency to demonstrate future potential. We also like to look at what your penetration and yield analysis is. If a prospect has an ability to give $100,000 and they are a donor, are those gifts coming in at their potential? Are they coming in above that potential? Or are they coming in below that potential? And most importantly, how much can we raise? When we do a historical assessment, we do conduct what we refer to as a CAGR, a compounded growth analysis, which looks at, if things were to remain unchanged in the program, how much you could forecast to raise going forward for the next 5 to 10 years, as well as when we overlay it with the philanthropic potential of the base, what the potential for a campaign could be based on projections of current penetration and yield versus stimulated penetration and yield. And as importantly, are you staffed appropriately? We run into environments where well-meaning people want to do campaigns and want to raise 3 to 4 times more money than they have done previously, but don't want to invest in the staff footprint to achieve that. And if you want to raise more money, you also have to be willing to invest in staff resources. But I would like to pause here for a second and ask Ava, in her former role at Ursinus College, where she was AVP for advancement, what stimulated her to consider conducting an analytics assessment?
Thanks, Michael. So we were midway through our campaign and maybe feeling, I don't know if we were more fatigued than the donor base, but people were fatigued on both sides of that line. And we needed to be able to show, in particular, our board, what it would take to reinvigorate the campaign and to get to that finish line and push it over. And so we needed to look at what we were doing internally, what we had access to in terms of the information on our donor base, and to put, quite frankly, our board on notice as it relates to their own support of the campaign. So that was sort of the impetus, was that we needed to sort of regroup and get to the end of the campaign.
Okay. Thanks. That's great. Aaron, if I could ask the same question of you, what was the motivation for Interfaith Interfaith Mission School to look at conducting an analytics assessment?
So very similar to what Ava described in the terms of being in the midst of a campaign and looking at where we were and how much more we needed to raise. We knew that we had wonderful potential, but we didn't understand how to harness it. And we knew that having good data would be able to inform us of what the next steps should be, who the potential donors are, and then identify relationships and be able to move forward to close the current campaign.
Okay, great. This slide right here is just an example. This is a 10-year look back for a client. Very basic stuff here. We're just looking to see and identify so everyone can see in a visual sense where the revenue streams are. This is also an important standard tool that we do for clients that have birth date information in the file, is to break out your file by generation. Particularly for annual giving, generational appeals are very important. There's a big difference in how messages are received between the boomers, Generation X, the greatest. Each responds to unique terms, words, and asks. It's also a very good idea to know where they fall out, particularly for planned giving, to know where to target that, as well as to target for leadership annual giving.
So this is another audience participation question. We're hoping, since this is sponsored by DonorSearch, that this could be a 100% answer here, that you've all screened your files, and that what we want to do is understand how best to use the information that we've received. Awesome. All right. Oh no, if that's a third. No, here we go. More coming in. Currently in the process. All right. So this is good information for us to have as we move into the next session. The last group we talked to, there were about 17% who had not done screening, and about 4% that were currently in process. So you're approximating what we ran into in Baltimore. The value proposition for DonorSearch is that they've actually amalgamated data that's already in the public domain. I don't have to do a sales pitch for Jay, but give me the platform for a second. They've taken information that sometimes members of board will wonder how you got this information about them. and is there some, peeping Tom sort of aspect to this, where you're getting information that's a little unseemly, and it's not that. As any public corporation discloses on a quarterly basis, the salary and incentive package for anyone in the C-suite, anyone who's got 5% or more of the company in terms of stock, what their holdings are, et cetera. We're taking data from database units, from Open Corporates, from CoreLogic, et cetera, and assembling all this information. GuideStar has obviously now been replaced by Candid, but all of this data is amalgamated, and then DonorSearch scores it. And the primary validation is that they identify a percentage of what they find at the household level that's associated with the person in your file, that name, that address, and can come up with the percentage of that net worth that's available for giving over a period of time. how much could someone give in cash over 5 years? And this is very helpful. For this particular client, there were 45 what we would call mega gift prospects, people with the capacity to give 10 million or more, $755 million prospects, and 3,700 major gift prospects. That is someone with a capacity to give 100,000 or more over, again, the course of 5 years. Now, the other thing that DonorSearch does is they come up with a DS rating, which is a compilation not just of capacity to give, but proclivity to give. In other words, they've assembled, and this is where Bill Tedesco was brilliant. He pulled together a data set of contributions that were made to nonprofit organizations that publish their honor roll. And so if you've made a single gift of $5,000 or more, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jay, but you would qualify as a DS1. And if you've made gifts of $5,000 in aggregate to another nonprofit, you'd be a DS1 too. And then DS1-3s are people that have known findings in this charitable gift data set. The average client of DonorSearch has about 16% of their file in those top 3 categories. And we utilize this as a way to rate what I'll call the proximity of a prospect to a particular ability to give. We also break out how much money is available in the different categories: friends, parents, alumni, faculty, etc. This is a university client. In a healthcare setting, it might be people that would be patients or guardians. Michael, you want to talk about the RFM analysis briefly? Because that
Sure.
research.
Yeah, RFM. Again, the recency. When was the last gift made? Frequency. How often does one give? Monetary amount. How much do they give? The score is rated on 0 to 100 on each of the 3 points. Your upper quartile is going to be 225 to 300, and then dropping down from that to 0. RFM is a great way to identify those prospects of capacity who have been overlaid with DonorSearch data and begin to put them into more of an active cultivation and engagement process.
And one of the things we found for campaign work in particular, if someone has been a frequent donor, they give regularly at the $250, $500 level, they may actually be more receptive than someone who gave you $1,500 last year. So the concept that these 3 dimensions are indexed is very helpful. So before we get into the work we do with the data that DonorSearch provides, have you performed, any of you on this call, any analytics predicated on the results, whether it's the capacity scores, the DS1 ratings? There's also a major gift likelihood score. There's an annual giving likelihood score. There's a planned gift likelihood score. Right now, we're split 50-50.
Which is not uncommon. Quite often, we work with clients who have done a DonorSearch or have utilized another service. They've done an overlay. If the data has gone in, they usually don't have the depth or the skill set on staff to do a complete analysis of that data. They may identify their top 100 or 200 and begin to farm those out for prospect discovery visits, but they don't have the ability, due to a lack of resources and quite often timing, to actually dive into the data, which drives so much of what we do.
Yeah, mostly it's time, I think. What we try to do is focus on a roadmap, defining a prospect topography. And I think this was what was helpful both at Independence Mission Schools and at Ursinus College, where predicated on the combination of the capacity. Anybody with $100,000 or up would have high capacity in our view relative to going into a campaign. Anybody below that would fall into that lower capacity quadrant in the yellow here, the lower right-hand corner. And then people with a lot of money, but who've never given to us, or they might have a low DS rating, those are people that you want to target for communications and marketing purposes, but it's going to take time to move that needle to get them from one side of that quadrant to another. And then quite candidly, Ava, I would look you in the eye and say, let's not do more than one email or one printed material to the people in the lower left corner, right? And that's sort of the ball game. So in this case, when you look at those DS11s to DS13s, here are the people that fall into those top three categories that we just referenced. And for the sake of grins and giggles, we try to combine the RFM score, in other words, those people that have already been giving to you with their DS1 ratings, because that's the low-hanging fruit. And Aaron, was that helpful when we had this conversation with you and your team?
That was immensely helpful for everyone on the team. The ability to see what the data is generating and then how you can make good decisions based off of that and how it can potentially impact your fundraising. And to see this visual and to see this information kind of repurposed in different ways really help provide the context that you need to understand it and how to move forward.
Yeah, the thing that always grabs me is the fact that all of these numbers are predicated on data points within your own donor base, right? So we can actually drill down and find out who those 533 people are. This is just a slide that demonstrates the value proposition of major donors. The blue line represents the number of households, the orange bars, the amount of money they've given. And you've got 26,000 people that gave 7 million over time, where you've got 63 that have given 21 million over time, which sort of describes the value of focusing on the people that have the money. But oftentimes the concern is, are we focusing too much effort on those few people, and are they experiencing donor fatigue? And that's where the screening helps identify people that can backfill. And as one group retires, you can bring other people into the picture. One of the things that I find helpful is looking at who's given to you in the last 5 years, because they're the easiest ones to upgrade, because the donor search capacity scores are predicated on how much people can give in the next 5. So while donors are better than non-donors, if you get back to the long lapse, people that haven't been giving to you in, say, what do I want to call it? 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be more difficult to get them to convert. So in this case, what we discovered was, for that data file, in the last 5 years, the people that were giving less than 1% of their capacity. So in academic parlance, this group had room for improvement. And when you look at penetration, we had the same kind of thing. So in this case, 17% of the file was giving. They were giving less than 1%. And that was $17 million from 5,600 people. And then, Michael, do you want to describe what would happen if you just focused on increasing the donor base or getting more money from the same people?
Sure. What's going to occur, I mean, if you try to go forward without at least understanding a baseline of what your current performance is, you're not going to be able to achieve the goals. You're going to burn out your staff. And you're not going to address the needs that the staff may have for better training as far as how to have these conversations as they're cultivating the prospects to consider higher thresholds of giving than they have previously. So you do need to know your base rate. You need to know what the penetration rate is. You also need, most importantly, to know what the yield is and to benchmark that against the philanthropic potential within the file.
Yeah, so what we're showing here is that they had a 17% participation rate or penetration rate and a 0.64% yield rate. So if Ava's boss came in and said, you know, we're all about alumni participation. We've got to increase the alumni participation. And by the way, they can give at the same level they've been giving. So if you focused on that and had a 25% increase, and you went from 17% participation to 21% participation, you'd have 7,000 donors and you generate 27 million bucks, 27 and a half. Or the boss could come in and say, I don't care where you get the money. We don't need any more donors. We just need more money. So if you could get the same people to give more of their capacity, and we had a 75% increase in yield, and even though the Bible and scripture talks about a 10% tithe, ain't nobody giving it. Giving USA data shows that charitable giving is about 2% of adjusted gross income and about 2% of GDP. So in this case, scenario B, you'd raise $39 million from the same number of people. I happen to know Aaron's boss, and she might turn around and say to Aaron, I need you to do both. We need more people and more money. And so scenario C is if you went all out and worked that group, you could generate $48 million if you had the 25% increase in participation and a 75% increase in yield. But the value here is that all of this is predicated on your file. And in some cases, it can be illuminating to say, ooh, you mean to tell me from individual major gift donors, we could raise nearly 50 million? Because if we laid in on top of that corporate gifts, foundation gifts, and the annual fund, you know, maybe we could talk about a 55 or maybe even a $60 million campaign. But if we got our eyes on a $75 million building, we would sit here across the table from you and say, you need to rethink and scale back, right? This slide, one of the things that DonorSearch does is they identify gifts that people in your file have given to other nonprofit organizations through oftentimes their family foundations. And in this case, what we've done is we've identified those people that have given more than their capacity rating would indicate. And sometimes this is because they happen to be living in an assisted living center, or there are other conditions, but it's another index to help influence the target gift amount. Michael, you want to talk about the value of going to California?
Would love to. One of the important things to do, particularly for your leadership, your volunteer leadership, your president, your chair, is data visualization. This type of mapping is critically important so those individuals can see where the prospects of potential are across the country, particularly if you're set up as this client is mid-Atlantic based, I believe Philadelphia based, but they really don't have much depth at all in regional. So there quite clearly is a need to, and I believe at the moment they have maybe one or two major gift officers for the home market. So there's a need to really add depth on the major gift side in the home market, but also at the same time to make strategic investments from a regional point of view, begin to get some events on the president's calendar, to Florida, to the West Coast, because there's great potential there that's just sitting there and not being cultivated. When we go through this range and we're looking at prospects of capacity, we forecast out based upon 20% of the prospect's philanthropic potential, meaning that prospects of capacity have a sophisticated approach to their giving. They're already supporting at least 4 or 5 other nonprofits. Your goal is to become one of those 5. You're never going to get 100%, but you want to be one of the 5 to get 20%. So if you know where these folks are based, if you have a president that travels, if you're doing events across the country, you need to start buying them plane tickets and going out with them and have those luncheons and have those cultivation events in Northern California and Southern California, as well as down to Florida.
Well, more importantly, you want to go to where the people are that have
Correct.
capacity to give, right?
Correct.
You could have a concentration of people in Boston, but if they're below the deck, the $100,000 threshold, you may not want to participate.
Exactly. And this is a great visual to share again with your leadership. I'm always amazed that the volunteers in charge of advancement, for the most part, don't have a good understanding as to what advancement is. And it's our job as staff to help educate them. This is a great slide to show them just all the steps involved. It's not about going out and asking for a significant gift on the first visit. It's all the assessment, all the engagement, getting that first visit, and then putting them into a cultivation and engagement pipeline, making sure you're doing research on the prospect that digs deeper than what you just have coming through on the general wealth assessment, running them through a cultivation process that is continually reinforcing their willingness and desire to support the organization, while at the same time engaging in some trial asks to get a sense as far as, do they want to do a scholarship, a professorship? Are they looking at something of more of a capital nature, so that when you actually do get to an ask, you're zeroed in relatively confidently as to what their giving objective is and what dollar range they're willing to consider supporting. And then this also helps to base out what your stewardship plan is going to be.
So Ava, when we sat down with you and looked at the prospects that were in portfolios, was it a surprise that people had folks in their portfolio that didn't qualify as major gift prospects, even though they were major gift officers?
It might not have been a surprise to me, but it might have been a surprise to people who had the portfolios. Most of us talk to people who are going to talk to us. And year over year, there are certain people who are going to continue to talk to us. They're going to have that cup of coffee with us. They're going to go out to lunch with us or whatever. But one of the values of really doing a deep dive into your data is to say, well, how have they performed? What has been the ROI on all these conversations? And therefore, should my portfolio be changed? Trying to convince people, or, maybe not convince, but help them understand that a portfolio is not a static document, and that this information informs who should be in, who should be out, who should be immediate, who should be, helped along that long pathway that Michael just showed. But it was really important to look at this data for our staff and our board, because there were people who were misplaced, people who should have been in a higher level, people who should have been down in the leadership annual giving portfolio. And so it was really important, especially when you have limited resources, limited human resources, to be able to craft your portfolios and work your population that is going to be the most likely to yield. So,
I mean, I think in your case, particularly, we found a sweet spot with those people, if you followed Michael's line of reasoning, if somebody's rated $10,000 over 5 years, that means they could give a $2,000 gift annually.
Right.
So we started focusing on people that could make that kind of a commitment, and actually put together Michael designed a training series to help get at this recurring gift. People less than $100,000, but they could do $2,000 or more a year for 5 years. That's 10,000 or 20,000, et cetera. Over time, that's a significant, sustainable resource. And once you get them into a program like that, major giving aside, they tend to renew and changes.
And stay around.
Yeah. And the value proposition is, instead of asking them every year, you go back with impact stories. So the stewardship becomes the overarching conversation, the value of what they've done, rather than asking them over and over to give again. Michael, you want to
You're
talk
training them to be mini major gift
about...
donors, because most times you're talking a five-year pledge. So they're beginning to think of giving, of not just giving $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year, but $10,000 a year. And for those that do have capacity, it's a great way to come in to the philanthropic base of the mission. And over time, you steward them, you bring them in closer. You don't treat them as just a run-of-the-mill annual giving donor. You engage them with other major gift donors and show them how to achieve their philanthropic potential.
Yeah, one of the other analytics tools we use, we have a methodology to identify best practice metrics for principal, major, and leadership annual gifts, and then based on the size of your prospect pool, calibrate, and the amount of time you have available, calibrate how many staff members you need. So Aaron, when we started looking at this with you, and you've got a rather, I call it lean team. And so this can be rather stunning when you go to the boss and say, we need to hire 3 or 4 more people.
Can I give my number?
Sure, go right ahead.
Our team is currently 6, so we are operating lean. The data showed that we needed to add 13.2 frontline fundraisers. That's a big difference in terms of where we are and where we need to be in order to realize the true potential that we have.
Yeah,
but we wouldn't have known that without the data.
But I'm imagining that there were some, like the CEO, the CFO, who were stunned to see that kind of calibration.
Yes, very much so. It's very eye-opening, and really helps build the case for what you can do, what's possible, and the path to get there, which is exciting and everybody wants to be a part of. So
in that situation where the data set is so big that you could justify hiring people, classically the budgets are not designed to absorb that all at one time. So our candid recommendation usually is, let's do the portfolio rebalancing. Let's get people making visits with people who could give at these levels, generate an increase in commitments received, and then in the second year, use some of those proceeds to start hiring people. So over a 3-year period, we might build up to that 13. Ava, I think you had a conversation with the board that indicated they should invest more in development.
Oh, yeah. I think our number was something like 8.7 people that needed to be added. And we did take the advice and share the concept that if we started working with different people first, that we wouldn't have to bring on as many new officers as soon. And so, that did work out, but without, just like Aaron said, without the data to prove it, people just say, oh, you just want more people. Well, yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, to the board and to other administrators, you want more money. So we're going to have to figure out where is that middle place where we can start seeing the reward and then add the people.
Well, if memory serves, you had people on your team who were spending a fair amount of time serving on campus-wide committees.
Yeah. So we had to refocus their work also to be actually advancement work, which is helpful when you work in advancement.
And that's a great outcome of going through this exercise is a lot of times everybody on the advancement team knows what they're doing, but they don't know how much of what they're doing is in their area of focus. You get engaged on committees, you get engaged on selection committees. If you have a dean, you start planning dean travel and everything else, and each one of those begins to take you away from what should be your core focus of major gift work. When we go in and do these, our goal is to get them to 75% of their time for true major gift officers to be focused there. And a lot of times when we go in and start, they're in the 40s. And it's by going in and seeing what they're doing and then beginning to take that work away and give it to others, or say this work shouldn't be done at all, that we then again try to focus them much more on what their true role is, which is to go out and do visits and solicitations.
And if you're in an environment where you've got an alumni relations office, you can focus their activity on the fundraising so that the gift officers can focus on the ask. Now, just to blow our own steam for a minute, I did the first ever campaign projection, I think it was 2001, for Lutheran Theological Seminary to justify a $25 million campaign. We've used this in a number of other places. At Virginia Tech, we used the data to develop an annual giving strategy to increase alumni participation from 9% to 22% in 5 years. That was the goal. And at Ursinus, we helped Ava actually complete that $100 million campaign. They were at the 50% mark, and where are we going to go? And they had a big gift that came in and helped them push that ahead of schedule, which is great. So this is something that's been tested and true in a variety of situations over a long time, but predicated on this conversation, do those of you who are listening in have a better understanding of the value proposition for this tool? And if you've got questions, we're going to want Jay to feed those to us as well.
Please.
No, there's going to be somebody who's still confused.
Not an uncommon thing.
All right, here we go. So, questions you've got for us, you can use this, and you can use the Q&A in the Zoom. And Jay, if you've got anything that somebody submitted, feel free to rejoin the conversation here and query any one of us.
Yeah, Scott, in the Q&A, we have one.
Somebody asked about portfolio.
Right. What do you suggest to be a target portfolio size? I would say it depends upon if you're talking leadership annual, if you're talking major gifts, if you're talking principal gifts, because those are all three different types of cultivation and solicitation processes. Major gift officers, it used to be large portfolios. I think we've been rather successful in addressing that. So now most major gift portfolios are in the range of 100 to say 125. Simple reason is you should have your portfolio tiered where you have your top 10. The top 10 you're going to solicit for the year. Those are 4 visits for that year. You then have your top 25 for the next year. Those should be 3 to 4 visits because those people will become your top 10 in the future. And then a well-crafted pool of discovery prospects, and that should be about 70 to 85 names. Leadership annual, that's a very quick process, quick ask. in and out. A lot of times those asks occur on the first visit. Those portfolios should reflect that because there's a lot of churn and burn on that. So that's a portfolio of, on average, about 200 names. Principal gifts, that's a much slower, methodical process. So the principal gifts traditionally in about the 50 names per principal gift officer per year.
Aaron, Ava, you want to add to that?
Well, those are great numbers, but coming from shops that are, I've worked in bigs and smalls. When you're in a very small shop, while you approach that number, that's where the movement on your portfolio really, really has to be addressed frequently. Because if you're trying to do the standard top 10, top 25, you know, and all of the time that takes, but there's only one of you, one major gift officer, or two at best, you're going to have to start doing some innovative things to reach as many in your portfolio and to shift that portfolio as often as possible.
Yeah, I think I'll give a shout out to a colleague. We used to do the case conference on major gift solicitation together. Dave Lively wrote a book, A Contrarian's Point of View. You know, his theory is, I want to know the 24 people you're going to solicit this year. That's your portfolio. And maybe there are a couple others that you're going to put in the pipeline for next year. But he's sort of the outlier that says if we focus small and focus on, you know, the requests that are going to be made over a 12-month timeline, that's how we're going to be most effective. A dear friend, Mark Lindemood, used to talk about 100. You know, you want 25 in each category, as Michael pointed out. The 25 you're going to solicit, the 25 you're going to put in the pipeline for next year, the 25 cold calls, and then the 25 people that have already made commitments that you need to steward, and you need that mix in your basket throughout the course of the year. Any other questions or commentary, thoughts of yours, Aaron, on any one of the ranges of subjects we touched on today?
I do. I just want to share that the opportunity to really look at our data and have it presented to us in a way that nobody on the team had looked at it before. And so when we were able to come together, each person on the team had a different perspective on how to move forward with the data, whether it was annual giving, prospect management, portfolio, you know, the CEO, our board. So it was really interesting. So I say, share the information. Also, this is now allowing us to operate in a more effective and efficient manner, right? And there's always pressure on us to do more now. We needed it yesterday. We're cutting the budget, those kind of conversations. If you're very smart in how you use this information, you can be more efficient, you can be more effective, you can hone in on where exactly you need to focus your energies, because where you focus is where you're going to produce results. And something that Ava said that is important is these portfolios are dynamic in the sense that, yes, there's some that are going to stay with you, but if you're in annual giving, you're moving them through the pipeline, right? You want to identify who the next prospective major gifts officers are, or major gift donors. Even that, maybe they could be principal donors, and then you're constantly moving through. So think of it as something that is dynamic and in motion. And so you don't want a lot of static, except for your core group that you're working with in that. But really understanding your data is going to set you up for success in the future. And it's worth the time and the resource to do it.
Well, I think we've hit the bottom of the hour. So I want to say thank you for your time and interest, and Jay for the invitation to participate. It's always a delight to be with you.
You came in right on the dot, which is amazing because you actually had to start a couple of minutes late due to some technical difficulties. So I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much for sharing and for doing it as a group, sharing from kind of inside and outside perspectives as you looked at these issues and doing it in such detail. Thank you all so very much. And I do want to just ask again, if people want to reach each of you, how is it best for them to do that? If they want to learn more about not just the work of your firms and your institutions, but just to follow your work and learn more about what you do and benefit from that experience.
So contact for us is our first name at visionaryphilanthropy.com. So you can do Scott or Michael at visionaryphilanthropy.com. Ava's got a relationship with us as well, or anything that you want to get at Aaron, it's eWoolley at
eWoolley at imsphila.org.
Or at my day job, it's awillis at oakwood.edu.
And thank you all again for this. And I do want to just give another mention that Ava was kind enough to do an episode of the podcast. So we'll make sure to include that in the follow-up email that goes out to everyone with a link to the recording of the session. So you can share that with others. Thank you all very much for doing that. I really do appreciate you. And also appreciate everybody here in the audience. I hope you'll join us again on Thursday when we have another session coming up. This one's a little bit unique. We have, of course, the head of Echoing Green coming in to talk with us about the weight of power, the role of metrics and evaluation at the intersection of social justice. That'll be something that you do not want to miss. Very interesting session from, again, the leadership team at Echoing Green. That's, again, on February 29th, and we don't have many of those. February 29th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, so check it out. It's a great leap day session and a leap year session, I should say. And you can see the rest of our calendar over at DonorSearch.net. In fact, if you still have your phones handy, you can take a look at the QR code where you can get a link to all of our upcoming programs. So with that, thanks everybody for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Thank you.